Okay, well, we're into the heart of the bike now. You've been seeing on some of my other videos, if you've been watching, I've been having starting problems with this bike, and yeah. So anyway, I think the problem could be all this oil that I've got on the top of the piston. So you can see I've had a bit of a smudge there. I've already touched it, but yeah, if I just smear that up a bit more, you can see it. It's quite oily. So not quite sure if that's enough oil to give me this whole problem that I'm getting, but I think it's why my plugs keep dying and not wanting to let this bike run nicely. So next step, take the barrel off. I've got some piston rings from Groves. Obviously there's only a few suppliers for Velocette parts really, but these piston rings are JP. Don't even quite see it. JP pistons anyway. Oh yeah, JP. Don't like JP pistons. I've had problems with them in the past, but I'm limited. Like I say, I'd much rather have Amiga, but I feel like I'm a bit limited on supply for Velocette specific parts. But anyway, so there's the rings, black colour for whatever reason. What I'm aiming to do, I've had to buy 2 sets of rings, quite expensive, like about £100 including postage. What I'm hoping to do is to use one oil ring, but to use 2 compression rings per groove on the piston. So that's why I've had to buy 2 sets. I won't need 2 of them obviously, but yeah, because the original rings in this piston, in this original Hepalite number 1415 I think it is piston, I'm pretty sure that my rings are actually 1/8 of an inch. So that's the plan. Like I said, I'm going to get this apart and we'll double check, but yeah, I kind of feel like maybe the rings are failing because they're original rings, original used piston, new old stock bore, standard, never been messed about with. But the end gap on my rings when they were inside the bore was quite big. So barrel off, as you can see. Piston doesn't look too bad, to be fair. Found a couple of up and down scores on the barrel, which is not great because obviously it's still got all the honing marks, but to have some up and downs is a bit worrying. Anyway, so I've got my rings out. These are the original rings. You can hopefully see how chunky they are. They're very, very, very fat rings. That's my oil ring. So what I want to do really is I want to check the sizes. Like I say, these rings look really nice. So maybe it's not the problem, but anyway. So if we was to take the old oil ring and the new oil ring, that's the first one I'm just going to double check with my verniers. I'm going to go in foul, be right. Right, so old one, 1545, 1550. So that's fine. That's a good swap. Now, this is the big one, really. So we got 1 old ring versus 2 new rings. So what we got here then? So that is right. 1, 2, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 5. Yeah, not so good. Okay, so I've got a confession to make. I've been diagnosing the problem with this bike regarding, well, the plugs keep dying. And obviously I had that real hard start problem. So yeah, obviously the confession is the fact that I've ignored the advice of every single Velo owner that I've met and known and spoken to on the internet and whatever that knows anything about these Mark 1 Cami engines. So they always say after you've rebuilt the engine you have to check the oil pressure, and I just didn't bother with that. I felt, it's been set up before, what's really changed, obviously other than the fact that it's being rebuilt. However, I now have a suspicion that my oil pressure is way too high. I think that potentially it's at like 20 psi and it needs to be between 7 and 9. So yeah, so anyway, so I'm going to check it now, because obviously what I was going to do is I was going to replace my valves and guides, just because what I've got fitted is what came with the bike. And and although they checked out when I measured them, maybe they're not quite right, and I bought the new parts, so I could easily just change them out. But I feel like it's worth doing an oil pressure check. If it is way high, then obviously that might solve the problem, because I feel that this engine requires a low oil pressure to be working correctly. So I feel that maybe the oil pressure has just been, hammering on down into the piston combustion chamber. So anyway, I got one of these, which came with the bike, and I had another one made because this hex felt too big when I looked at images of originals. So I got this one here that I had made, and I've had the original working drawings purchased. Bought them, made it to that. Engineer made a slight error, has done something that's not quite right, but the hex is right and everything else, obviously. So this one was then surplus. So I've drilled and tapped it with, I think it's 1/4 inch BSP. And I've got myself a new old stock Budenberg gauge. It reads up to 100 psi. And I found another one which read up to 20 psi, but sadly although I purchased it, they can't find it or something. So we're going to rely on this one, which is not perfect. But yeah, I'm going to get it in here. We're going to run the bike up, and I'm going to check. But when I had a look at my oil return, it was such a good fast rate on an idle that I kind of did think that's quicker than normal, and that's what kind of made me suspicious. So yeah, we'll do this. Like I said, I haven't checked it. We're going to do this, and I'm guessing it's 20 psi, so I could be way wrong, but let's find out. I've had to take the hand change gear lever off to be able to install this. I guess I could come up with another solution, but anyway, that's what I thought I'd go for. I'm just going to put some PTFE around the gauge thread, because this is not a tapered fit like a lot of BSP is tapered, isn't it? But this is straight. So now, I don't know if you've done this before, but you've got to do this in the right direction so that when you screw it in, it doesn't want to fall off. Alright, now I'll do it. We'll try it anyway. Unfortunately, that nut that I've got, the other original one, is just so loose in there that it might leak or whatever. So just didn't want to drill a hole and tap into the other one that I've got. So try this one. Alright, continuing on with my oiling problem, the spark plugs keep oiling and fouling. So I've been trying to find out what's going on. I decided to remove the oil pressure adjustment screw, which is this item. I haven't moved the position of the lock nut because I'm worried that obviously I'm going to adjust things too wrong, but then again, it's the way it is, I'm going to have to adjust it. So I can put this back in and start further out, and then just keep going in until I get to the position it was in, and if this needs to go in further, obviously I'll wind it in further. So the things I found were this piece here that sticks out past was bent massively. Like now it's pretty straight, it's perhaps not perfect, I might do a bit more adjustment, but it was really bent. This is the original spring that came off of it. That goes over there, but I have a brand new spring here from the club. This is a little bit longer, so when we compare the two, you're looking at about 5 millimeters longer, so hopefully that will apply a bit more pressure than what the original one does. I haven't tested them to see how springy they are. They have a slightly more open end and a narrow end, so the bigger end is to go against the ball bearing, which this is, I can't really show you this properly. Anyway, that is a 1/4 inch ball bearing, which is what should be inside my engine. I'm not sure if it is or isn't. I haven't been able to get it out. So what I discovered was, the main discovery was that the ball bearing was stuck down in the end on its seat. So first attempt was using this magnet, which fits down through the hole. Just couldn't get it to connect. Probably the ball bearing is stainless steel, but this one here, even though it's, again, probably a stainless steel ball bearing, is magnetic, so that's kind of good. But anyway, that didn't get it out. So then I was in there poking around with like a little screwdriver, because I could just get it down. I could feel it nibbling in every direction off the end of the ball. So I kept poking around with that, didn't work. I kind of like had a cotton bud thing that I was just trying to get in there and remove any residual oil to try and clean up so I could see a little bit better. I had this little bit of wire I was trying to poke in trying to make it into a slightly hook. Doesn't do anything. And then this tool was possibly the best. This is my pick, and I had to remove the handle because I couldn't get it in between where the gearbox is, and that I just had in there, and I could get again to the side of the ball, and I just kept trying to manipulate side to side to try and free off this ball, and in the end I have managed to free it. But I was squirting in there WD-40, what's the other one I've got, plus gas, which is another thing to release. And then I had to start adding heat to the crankcases. I tried a hot air gun, wasn't sure it was quite getting it warm enough, and I got an actual blowtorch on it, which is a bit dangerous because of the nature of the metals. Anyway, I tried all that. So then eventually I think that freed off probably some old stuck Castrol oil that perhaps was keeping that ball in the stuck closed position. Anyway, now it moves, so I can feel it in there clanging around. You'll see these straps here. I elevated the front of the bike quite high with the idea that the ball should be able to then roll out, because at the moment it's kind of dead flat. Didn't work, and I had a small pipe diameter, like fuel pipe, going into a Hoover vacuum cleaner, and sucking like mad to try and get on the end of the ball and pull it out, which doesn't work. But when I borrowed an endoscope camera, I could see down inside, you've got like the hole, the bore with the threads for this thing here, the adjuster. There's a bronze looking item going across the bore, and that had a scallop out of it, which I assume is to allow that ball bearing to pass. But I think what's happening is the ball bearing is loose now, but it comes to that bronze bit and it's that slightly raised compared to the actual bore, and I think that's stopping it from coming out. Yeah, kind of good discovery to find that there was something wrong down in there, and hopefully we might solve the problem of my spark plugs dying. But then again, we might not, because I'm not quite sure how that thing works, but it would indicate to me, from what I've been told, that perhaps with it in the shut closed position, the oil should be coming up to the top of the engine more than at the bottom, which has not been happening. I've obviously been getting more at the bottom and not enough at the top. So yeah, anyway, great to keep finding out more and more things and try and solve problems. This is a restoration project and it's nearly done, and it will be on the very, very soon, So anyway, cool. Right then, carrying on with my oil pressure issue. So I'll probably show you some things where I had the barrel off and I was changing my piston rings because I thought, probably getting oil coming up past the rings. I've been running it with the gauge on. I'm not getting enough oil pressure. Tested if there's oil coming out of the cam box. There wasn't. So down here at the back of this timing chest area, whatever, there's an adjustable oil pressure, and I kept adjusting this in and out. We discovered that the ball inside there was too big, so I replaced it for the correct size ball. Still couldn't get this oil pressure sorted. So a friend I've met through doing all this kind of stuff, I think, provided me with a little tool that I could insert in that adjustable bit to just block it off, so to make sure that the seat and the ball and whatever, did that, got up to about maybe 6 psi. It's not enough. I should have gone above that. So then the next concern was, again, through doing all these videos and stuff, it is worth doing the online stuff. I've made a new friend, and they sent me a little article, and it had about 3 different potentials for why this isn't working. The most scary one is there's a shim in behind here, behind the bottom bevels that is inside the crankcases. It's meant to be there to obviously stop the oil, you know, just going straight through to the sump there. That could either be damaged or missing. So I bought 2 new ones of them. Just, it's nice to have some spares anyway. And I didn't want to take all this shit off, but obviously I've done that, and now we're at this stage that I'm filming. Just didn't want to take all the chain and sprocket off for the timing, because I have to retime it and it's all a pain. But anyway, bit the bullet. So down here, although you've got that one that adjusts the oil pressure, on the end of the crankshaft here, there's another ball valve, which I didn't know about. What's good is there's, like, in the end, little tiny holes in this nut. So I can poke this in here and I can think, oh, okay, has that gone down, you know, past the middle point, or what's going on here? Because there should be a ball in there. So that kind of helps me just double check that the ball is being seated correctly. This goes down further than the middle, so that's a bit worrying. So anyway, so I have to lock up on the other side my primary chain, just chucking in a bit of hardwood in there, and then was able to crack this nut off. Now you've got to remember, this is a left-hand thread, okay? So managed to crack it, and then I just want to see what's inside here. And I've also bought, actually, I've bought a new spring for inside here, and again a spare, because I don't know whether the spring's missing or what the hell's going on. So anyway, so if I undo this, look as if I'm tightening it up. Right, okay. I'm not sure how the lighting is going to come out with this, but anyway, down inside that, there is a little ball in there, and inside here we have a spring. So if I just take the ball out, right, now this ball is supposed to be a 1/4 inch ball, and to my eyes that looks a bit small, but I do have obviously a new 1/4 inch ready to go. So yeah, so if I compare those two, again, this is going to be a problem with the camera obviously, but hopefully you're going to see that there's quite a big difference there actually. I'll have to measure them with my verniers, but there is quite a big difference there. So again, I haven't got the light on the correct for the camera here, but anyway, down inside this there's like a little chamfer at the bottom, and then you've got these 3 oil ways coming into it. So with this smaller ball in there, it looks fine when you look at it down there, but I don't think it's seating on the angle. I think that small ball is going to the back where these oil ways are, but I just don't think it's quite right, because like I say, the oil must be just continually getting to the bottom of my engine, because every time I drain the crank out, way too much oil comes out and it always smokes a lot, and I haven't got the oil pressure up here. So my theory is that at the moment this chamber gets filled up with oil and it's supposed to get pumped up here, and I guess some is allowed to get into there, or maybe it comes the other way, I'm not quite sure. But this thing in here is definitely not right, and that's a massive result for me, because if that's all it is, that ball bearing, that whoever previously built this engine put the wrong ball bearing in, I'm going to be well happy with that, because I don't really want to split the engine cases. It's bad enough I have to do all this stuff. So I've now got the correct size ball, which is an advantage, and here is the brand new spring from the Owners Club. This spring is different to the spring on the adjustable oil pressure, so bear that in mind. Now this is the spring that's currently in the bike. They look about the same, however, this old one that's in the bike, it's like they've stretched it out or something. It's got less turns on it. Not quite sure. But also lengthwise, it is around about 2 mil shorter, I would say. So new spring going in, and I think it's designed, like one end is slightly wider than the other end, so I think the wider end is for the ball bearing. That's the way I'm going to do it anyway. So that can go in there, and then the new ball bearing will go into this. I'm just figuring out the best way to make sure that it stays down in the bottom central, so that when I start to screw this on, it doesn't, you know, give me issues. The threads in here do not look perfect, but I don't have a left-hand thread this size for tap. Anyway, yeah, so I'll get the ball in there somehow seated, and I'll nip this back up, blocking that up again, primary chain on the opposite direction, obviously. Get that tightened up. All right, now then, I've sorted out on the other side that crank shaft ball valve. Hopefully with the new spring and the correct size ball, it's going to be all sorted. But now obviously I need to go back and sort out my ignition timing. So the first thing to do is to find top dead center. Then I'll put a degree wheel on here, and then I'll have that 0 for top dead center on that and on that, and then yeah, I'll be able to find the right amount of degrees before top dead center, and then we'll be doing the ignition timing, setting the points gap to be opening just the right time for this. So anyway, so I had to buy an adapter from an 18mm spark plug to a 14mm spark plug, and then I've gone and bought this dial gauge that goes into this like dummy spark plug effectively, but like I said, I had to get an adapter for the 18mm to 14mm because this thing is for a 14mm. So anyway, you've got different lengths probes that go on here, and I know that that's roughly at top dead center at the moment, not perfectly. I've got it pretty much on the 0 on this gauge to where I think top dead center is. I'll just try and show you rotating the engine back and forth a little bit, and we'll see what happens. Right, you see the needles going down this way? If I change direction, it's coming back up to about the 0, holding, and then going back that way. The next thing to do is I'm going to put my degree wheel on here, and realistically I probably should remove this piece and put my degree wheel behind this, which I have done before, but I'm going to see if I can get away with putting that on there and putting a magnet on there. And I want this on here because if I can put a mark to where I think top dead center is, I'll probably have to rotate it via the rear wheel now, unless I can put the socket in there, we'll see. But yeah, because when that needle was pausing, so I was rotating it, it was getting to the top and then it was doing nothing, and then it was coming back, and I went the other way, got to the top, did nothing, then came back. There's quite a lot of degrees of movement at that top pause position of the piston, so I like to try and get the actual marker on my degree wheel in the middle. So if I figure that top dead center is say there, and for that pause I've got say 2 degrees that way, 2 degrees that way, I will try and get it just right for the middle of the pause. I'm not quite sure if that's right, or whether you should do it from just rotating the engine forward when it meets the top dead center, or like I say, I always try and do it for the middle because there's always these couple of degrees. So anyway, we'll have a look at that, and hopefully I can get this sorted out with a mark with a bit of wire from a bolt on here somewhere, pointed to 0 where I feel top dead center is. Then I can do adjusting of the opening and closing of the points.